So we're holding in Tractate Chullin, Perik Revi, the fourth chapter. The name of the chapter is Boheimah Hamekashah. The following Mishnah deals with treifa, defects, and hind legs. An animal's hind leg consists of three major sections. From the bottom upward, the sections are composed of the hoof and what is called the cannon bone, the shank bone, tibia, and the thigh bone, femur. These upper joints, these sections are separated by two joints, the lower joints between the cannon and shank bones, and is the tarsus, guess it's a Latin word, and the upper joint between the shank and the thigh bone is the patella. At the base of the shank bone, above the tarsus, is the Ch4 junction of sinews, the place where several sinews descending from the animal's hind quarter converge on the bone. The Mishnah discusses when an injury to one of these parts renders an animal treifa.
There's a nice picture here of the sinews according to...
We have it also, the three tendons of the Ch4 according to Rashi is understood by Mordechai and Ramo. Right. So we have it in color. Okay. He has it also right in big, you have it. The junction of sinews, Ch4. See, it says Ch4.
So the upper part of the leg has the sinews connected to it, and the lower part doesn't.
So we have the thigh bone, yorech. We have arkuba alyon, the upper joint, the patella. We have the shoik, the shank bone, the tibia. We have the arkuba tachtoino, the lower joint, which is the tarsus. And we have the cannon bone, which is the metatarsus. And then we have the bottom ones, the hoof. Okay? Yeah. So, Boheimah, what is now the Mishnah says, Boheimah shenechtechu ragleo, an animal, if an animal's hind legs were severed below, hind legs were severed below the joint. Hind legs were severed below the joint, keshera. It is still fit for consumption, for it is not treifa, keshera. Mina kubo velamalo. But if they were severed above the joint, psula. It is unfit for consumption because it has been rendered treifa. So we have that so far, al kubo velamato is kosher, al kubo velamalo psula. When we say al kubo, we mean the upper joint. When we say al kubo tachtoino, the lower joint. We need to remember the upper joint and above it's pasul, the lower joint and below it's kosher.
Chuba means where it's joined together between right in the middle. Is that what a chuba means?
Al-kuba is the joint. The word al-kuba refers to the joint.
It's above what would be equivalent to a knee in a person.
So it says the al-kuba al-yoina, if you look at the picture, the upper joint, the patella, is right next to the thigh bone. It's closer to the thigh bone. So from that point and on, meaning it's closer to the tail, from that point, if it's severed, it's treifa. But al-kuba tachtoina, the tarsus, is really closer to the shank bone, and from there, it's going to be kosher.
Boheimah has two joints there where we only got one. A person only has one. Right?
We have the shin and the thigh, right?
Yeah, but
The,
we
the
have a
shin
knee,
and the
they
thigh.
have this,
Right, right. It seems like they have
have a longer.
1, 2, 3. It's like 3 or 4. It's as if the hind leg is connect. It's like 3 or 4 bones that are
Right. Well, we have
connected to
two,
each other.
And then the foot. Okay.
V'chein shenit al tzemes agidin, and similarly, if the junction of sinews was removed, the animal is unfit. Nishbar o etzem, if the bone was fractured and the broken ends pierced the skin, but it was severed, the following rules applies. Im not severed. If baso kayom, if the greater part of the flesh remains, shchitose metartoi, the animal's shchita purifies the limb for consumption. Ve'im lav, but if the greater part of the flesh does not remain, ein shchitose metartoi, the animal's shchita does not purify the limb. So it's seemingly a short Mishnah, but it has a lot of details. The first part is the upper joint. It tells us that it's going to be pasul, a lower joint will be kosher. Then we learned about the junction of sinews that was removed. The animal is unfit. Now, if there's a fractured bone, before we spoke about the hind legs that were severed. Now we're speaking about, in the second case, we see nishbar or etzem. If it was not severed, rather it was fractured, and the broken ends pierced the skin, it was not severed, the following rule applies. We said if most of the flesh, if the greater part of the flesh remains, the shchita purifies the limb. V'im lav, and if the greater part of the flesh does not remain, ein shchitos metarto, the animal's shchita does not purify the limb. So far is the Mishnah. The Gemara focuses on the definition of the terms below and above the joint. Right? We said Akuba Elyeino, Akuba Tachtoino. Amar Yehuda, Amar Rav, Amar Abichia. Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav, who said the name of Abichia. Lemata, when the Mishnah states below, Lemata min Akuba, it means directly below the joint. Lemalo, and when it states above, Lemailo min Akuba, it means directly above the joint. That is, if the leg is severed anywhere below the joint, the animal remains fit. And if it is severed anywhere above the joint, the animal is treifa. That's exactly what we learned in the Mishnah. And the Gemara says, Be'ezo arkuba amru, regarding which joint did they say this? Barkubo animkeres im harosh, regarding the joint that is sold with the head. That is, the lower joint of the leg, the tarsus, is being sold with the head. The Mishnah rules that if the leg is amputated below the tarsus, on the cannon bone, the animal is fit for consumption. But if it is amputated above the tarsus, on the shank or thigh bone, the animal is treifa. A dissenting interpretation. Ula Omar Rabbi Yeshaya, Ula said in the name of Rabbi Yeshaya, Kenegdoi begomol nikar. The Mishnah refers to the joint whose counterpart in a camel is noticeable. That is, the upper joint, the patella. Thus, it means that if the leg is amputated below the patella, even on the shank bone, the animal remains fit. And if it is amputated above the patella on the thigh bone, the animal is treifa. So we have two beautiful diagrams over here, pictures that are showing the patella by a camel and the patella by a cow. And they're both on two different locations. They're positioned completely different. The patella with the cow is all the way, it's almost in the stomach.
Yeah.
And the patella with the camel is on his leg.
It would be terrible if you get close to the cow and feel these things.
So,
Wow,
Rabbi,
that's
just
pretty
to,
vivid.
just to clarify, the shchita doesn't kosher, doesn't make it kosher. Now you have the second stage.
Of course,
How to
you have to
cut.
check. You have to check the animal.
How to cut the leg. So we
No,
don't
no. The leg, if the leg was amputated because, let's say they were afraid for the cow's life and had some kind of a disease, so they amputated the leg. The question is where they amputated it in order to know if it's kosher or not.
This is before
It
shchita.
sounds
If
like
it-
what we learned before. In other words, if the fetus sticks its leg out, right, and because the mother's having difficulty and it's amputated, right, or whether it's hanging, right,
Right.
it makes a big difference.
So this is before shchita.
Yeah.
Omar le'ulo le'Rav Yehuda, Ula said to Rav Yehuda, Bishlema le'didi da'amina kenegde begomol nika. All is well according to me, who said that the Mishnah refers to the joint whose counterpart in a camel is noticeable, the upper joint, and it means to rule the animal fit even if the shank bone, which is below the upper joint, was severed. Hainu diktoni v'chein shenit al tzemes agidin. This is why, after teaching that if the leg was severed below this joint, the animal is fit, but if it was severed above the joint, it is unfit. The Mishnah proceeds to teach, and similarly, if the junction of sinews was removed, it is unfit, not kosher. The Mishnah informs us that although it previously ruled the animal fit if its leg was severed below the joint, that applies only when the amputation occurred on the upper portion of the shank bone. But an amputation on the lower portion of this bone in the junction of sinews renders it treifa. El ledidoch, but according to you, according to the one who says that the Mishnah refers to the lower joint and teaches in its first clause that if the leg was severed directly above this joint, which is the junction of sinews, the animal is treifa. Mai v'chein shenit al tzemes agidin. What is the purpose of then stating, and similarly, if the junction of sinews was removed, it is unfit? This was already included in the previous ruling. Rav Yehuda responds, Omar le rechuva v'lo tzemes agidin. The Mishnah first teaches that the animal is treifa if the bone alone is cut without any injury to the junction of sinews. And it then teaches that the animal is similarly treifa if the junction of sinews is removed without any injury to the bone. Ula retorts, Ula says, but the Mishnah states that if the legs were severed above the joint, the legs were severed above the joint, the animal is unfit. How can you interpret this as meaning that the bone alone was cut while the junction of sinews remained intact?
That's impossible.
Rav Yehuda's reaction, Ishtik, he was silent. Levos Ardenofak Omar, however, after Ula left, Rav Yehuda said to himself, My tamar lo amrile, why did I not tell him that lemato min al-kuba? When the Mishnah states below, it means that if the leg was severed below the lower joint and the junction of sinews, the animal is fit. Lemailo mitzemes hagidin. And when it states above, it means that that if the leg was severed above the lower joint and the junction of sinews, it is treifa, referring to an amputation not directly above the lower joint, but higher up on the shank bone, where the sinews have diverged. This clause does not discuss the law pertaining to an amputation at the junction of sinews. Accordingly, the Mishnah's next ruling may be understood as adding that the animal is also unfit if the leg was severed directly above the lower joint in the junction of sinews itself. Hodar Omar, afterward, he said, "It is well that I did not tell this to Ula. V'loi omrile, did I not tell him a reasonable explanation that the Mishnah first discusses a case where the bone was cut without an injury to the sinews, and then a case where the sinews were removed without an injury to the bone. Yet he replied, the Mishnah states that the legs were severed. That is, he rejected my explanation because I did not
fit with the plain meaning.
I did not fit with the plain meaning of the words. Hachanami, here too, if I had told them that above the joint means well above the lower joint, beyond the junction of sinews, he would have responded, Minar kubo ulamala ketoni. The Mishnah states above the joint, which implies directly above it in the junction of sinews itself. And since this is the plain meaning of the words, if indeed the Mishnah refers to the lower joint, there is no need for it to subsequently rule that removal of the sinews renders the animal treifa. Ula would not have accepted even my alternative explanation. It says in number 20, one might argue perhaps the Mishnah first teaches the law for the case where the bone and sinews were severed, and then the law for the case where only the sinews were removed. However, this cannot be, for if so, it should have omitted the first law, and we would have deduced it from the second. A variant version of Rav Yehuda's opinion is presented. Rav Papa Masne Yochi Omar Rav Yehuda Omar Rav Omar Rabbi Chia. Rav Yehuda sent the name of Rav, who sent the name of Rabbi Chia. Lamato, when the Mishnah states below, Lamato minar kubo mitzemis hagidin, it means when the word says, when we see the word lamato below, it means for below the upper joint, patella, the shank bone and the junction of sinews on the cannon bone. Lemailo, and when it states above, lemailo minar kubo mitzemis hagidin, it means above the upper joint, above the patella and the junction of sinews on the thigh bone. The Mishnah has taught that severing the leg anywhere on the cannon bone or hoof leaves the animal fit, and severing it anywhere on the thigh bone renders it unfit, but has not discussed the law of the shank bone. It then states, similarly, if the junction of sinews was removed, the animal is unfit, teaching that with regard to the shank bone, severing it at the junction of sinews renders the animal unfit, but severing it elsewhere above the junction of sinews leaves the animal fit. V'alkuvo gufo kideula omar Rabbi Yishaya. And according to this interpretation, Rav Yehuda's definition of the joint itself is in accordance with the definition of Ula in the name of Rabbi Yeshaya. It refers to the upper joint, patella. According to both Ula and the second version of Rabbi Yehuda, if the shank bone is severed at its bottom, at the junction of sinews, the animal is treifa. But if it is severed higher up, the animal remains fit. It's the opposite of what we originally learned in the Mishnah. Umi kamidei, can there be such a thing? That if one severs it higher up, the animal survives. Metate posikle umesa. Yet if one severs it lower down, the animal dies. Is it such a thing? Usually it's the opposite.
Yeah.
Omaravashi treifos medamis la'adode. Are you comparing treifa defects to one another? Question mark. And we do not say regarding treifa defects that this one is comparable to that one. For experience demonstrates that when one severs it here, it dies. Yet when one severs it there, in the bottom, it survives. So don't compare them to each other. We're soon going to learn about the talus. Talus, if I pronounce it correctly. Talus is where the bones are meeting each other. The bones are meeting each other, and that's where they're bendable, right? Having clarified the meaning of the joint, the arkubo, and where amputation of the bone renders the animal treifa, the Gemara proceeds to define the boundaries of the junction of sinews. And which precise area is considered the junction of sinews. Three opinions are presented. Rabba Omar Rav Ashi. Rabba said in the name of Rav Ashi, the agarmo ulevar. It is the area where the sinews veer outward, away from the bone. Rabba bar Rav Huna Omar Rav Ashi. Rabba Rav Huna said in the name of Rav Ashi, the agarmo ulegav. It is the area where the sinews run inward and cling to the bone. Rava Brei de Rava bar Rav Huna Omar Rav Ashi de Ilave. Rava, the son of Rabba bar Rav Huna, said in the name of Ashi de Ilave Arkuma. It is the entire area that is above the arkum, above the talus. A related, you can look at the diagrams and the photos over here to see.
Sort of like our kneecap.
Kneecap, yeah. A related discussion is cited. A certain rabbi was sitting before Rabbi Abba, and as he said, the arkuma gufo, even the area of the arkum itself, the talus, is included in the junction of sinews. Don't listen to him, for his ruling is overly stringent. This is what Rabbi Yehuda said. The junction of the sinews begins at the point where butchers begin to fillet the leg, or to flay. When butchers wish to devein an animal's hind leg, they begin by making an incision just above the tarsus. That's where they start to flay or devein the animal. I guess also the process of niku is mainly on the internal, but to remove the skin, you have to start from there. If you ever seen when they hang the sheep or the cow, they cut a little bit from the tarsus area and they hang it. Yeah, and that's where they start to get rid of the skin.
Is the hoof like the toes, and then the cannon bone like the bottom of the feet?
The hoof is the bottom.
The ankle.
The hoof is the bottom. It's like all the way there.
Right, but if it was to compared to us, if it was to lay down that bone horizontal, it would be like the foot, and that part would be like the ankle where all the sinews come together, like the Achilles tendon and stuff.
Right.
And then the shank would be this.
By us, we can't compare it really to us because it's different than us.
You're way more complicated.
Yeah, it seems like they have much more in there. We got the thigh and the shin. It's like that's it.
But this right here would be our ankle, where all the
Right.
sinews come very effective.
V'hainu Rabba Bereide Rabba Baravun Amar Ravasi, and this is the same as the definition given above by Rava, the son of Rabba Baravua, in the name of Ravasi. It is just above the arcum, just above the talus. Having concluded that the junction of sinews begins just above the arcum, the Gemara focuses on how far upward it extends. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Tzoimes Hagidin She'amru, Tzoimes Hagidim She'amru, the junction of sinews that they mentioned, Mokim Shehagidin Tzoimsin, is the place where the sinews are joined. Further clarification is thought, Ve'ad kama, and how far upward does this extend? A more detailed version of Rav Yehuda's statement is cited. Omar lu Ha'umed Rabbanon Rav Yaakov Shemei. A certain rabbi named Rav Yaakov said to them, Ki avinan bei Rav Yehuda Omarlan. When we were in the academy of Rav Yehuda, he told us, Shim'u mini milso de megavro rabo shemieli umanu Shmuel. Listen to me as I say something that I heard from a great man. And who is he? He is Shmuel. Tzoimes Hagidim Shamru, the junction of sinews that they mentioned, Mokem Shagidin Tzoimsin Boy, is the place where the sinews are joined. Umi Mokem Shetzoimsin Ad Mokem Shemispashtin, and it extends upward from the place where they are joined until the place where they diverge. The Gemara defines this more precisely. V'chama, and how great is the distance between these two joints? Amar Abaye said, Arbo batadei beseiro. It is 4 finger breadth in the case of an ox. Bedako mai, in the case of a small animal, a sheep or goat, what is the extent of its junction of sinews? Omar Abaye, belite havut tzoimes hagidin, where the sinews protrude, they are in the junction of sinews. Belie loy havut tzoimes hagidin, but where they are absorbed in the flesh, they are not in the junction of sinews. Ashune havu tzoimes hagidim, where they are hard, they are in the junction of sinews. Rakiche loy havu tzoimes hagidin, but where they are soft, they are not in the junction of sinews. Alimei havu tzoimes hagidim, where they are thick, they are in the junction of sinews. Ketine loy havu tzoimes hagidim, but where they are thin, they are not in the junction of sinews. Chivrei havu tzoimes hagidin, where they are white, they are in the junction of sinews. Loi chivrei, loi havu tzemes agidin. But where they are not white, they are not in the junction of sinews. So the Gemara gives us many ways of finding out what is part of tzemes agidin, the junction of sinews, and what is not. Achilles tendon, the two inner tendons, and we have the Achilles tendon in the diagram over here, the three tendons of the tzemes agidin, according to the Ravid.
That's the one that's like right behind us. So Achilles.
Right behind.
This one in the back here.
That's the Achilles.
Achilles tendon. Whatever. Yeah.
But see, it's completely different.
Well, no, that's what I was saying. Right there in that part.
Right.
So it's weird because their legs are like this. If they were just to lay that whole thing down, the little bone that sticks out is like part of the heel. But we have it coming out. So in a way, they're on their tippy toes walking.
Yeah. A dissenting opinion. Mar Baravashi Omar Kevan Dezige, as long as they are pale, Af al gav deloi chivrei, even though they are not actually white, they are deemed to be in the junction of sinews. Having described the boundaries of the junction of sinews, the Gemara defines what constitutes a fatal severance of these sinews. What is considered fatal severance and what is not? Having described the boundaries of the junction of sinews, the Gemara defines what constitutes a fatal severance of these sinews. Omar Ameimar Mishmei de Rav Zevid. Ameimar said in the name of Rav Zevid, Tloso Chutei Havu. There are three strands of sinew in the junction. Chadalima Usreketine, one of which is relatively thick, and two of which are relatively thin. Ipsik Alimo. If the thick one is severed, as the roiv binyon, the structural majority of the sinews in the junction has been lost. If seketine, and if the thin ones are severed, as the roiv binyon, the numeric majority of the sinews in the junction has been lost. In either case, therefore, the animal is treifa. A different version of the previous teaching, Ma Baravashi Masne Lekula. Ma Baravashi teaches Rav Zevid's statement leniently. If Sik Alimo, if the thick one is severed, Aikarov Minyan. Why the numeric majority of the sinews in the junction is still there? If siketine, and if the thin ones are severed, ha'ikar binyan, why the structural majority of the sinews in the junction is still there? In either case, therefore, the animal remains fit. So two different opinions. The Gemara describes the law pertaining to fowl. Be'efor is in the case of birds, shitzar chute avu. There are 16 strands of sinews in the junction. And if even one of the 16 is severed, the bird is treifa. A related incident is cited on Baravashi. Baravashi said, I was standing before Avashi. When a bird with a possible defect of this sort, meaning that one of the 16 strands of sinew was severed, and this was brought before him, and he examined it and found in it only 15 intact strands of sinews, meaning one is missing, right? However, there was one strand that was a different thickness than the others. Farther Rav Ashi split it and discovered that it was actually composed of two strands joined together, and it was really 16 there. It wasn't 15. So it really was a kosher bird.
Right.
They thought it was not, but Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav, Ch4 Shamru, concerning the junction of sinews that they mentioned, Beruboy, the animal is rendered treifa through the severance of its greater part. My ruboy, and what is the meaning of its greater part of the junction of sinews? Roi ve'echod meyen. It means the greater part of even one of the sinews. This itself suffices to render the animal treifa. Rav Yehuda continues, Ki amarti kamei d'Shmuel amar li. When I stated this ruling of Rav before my other teacher Shmuel, he told me, Migdi teloso havo. Let us see. There are three sinews in the junction. Accordingly, ki mifsik chad menayu legamre, ikatre, even when one of them is entirely severed. Why? Why do you say it's possible? There are still two that are intact, and these constitute the majority of all the sinews in the junction.
So
Certainly,
kosher.
correct. Certainly, if only the greater part of one sinew is severed, the animal remains fit.
We have tzitzis, in other words, that are hanging on two sides, right? So if it's cut off on one side, as long as still, the same string on the other side is still intact. In other words, we don't say that it's possible.
Pasul.
I think you still have to have length of 4 handbreadth.
Right, but one string that goes to the other side is still part of the same string, right?
Correct, but if one of them is cut, then
If
you're
it's
having
completely
only
cut off,
7, right?
Right.
You're going to have
If
only
it's
7.
completely
Yeah.
cut. I think it's enough that you can wrap around your finger or something.
Right.
like
I always learned the measurement of 4 four fingers, and it's at least the minimum. So, but over here, say if there's 3 and one of them is severed, you still have the majority of 2.
Yeah.
So why is it should remain fit? The Gemara draws an inference from Shmuel's words. Time of the ikatre. The reason that the animal is fit is that there are still 2 intact sinews. Ale ikatre lo. But if you don't have at least 2, then it's not going to be fit. Ufliga de Rabbanoi, and this version of Shmuel's opinion cited by Rabbi Yehuda is in disagreement with the version quoted by Rabbanoi. Rabbanai is name of the Amar Rabbanai Amar Shmuel. Rabbanai said in the name of Shmuel, Tzoymes Hagidin, concerning the junction of sinews, Afilo nishtaya bo lakichut asarbol, even if there remains of it only as much as the thickness of the string of a cloak, meaning very thin, kshera, the animal is fit. V'ikadeamrei, and some say it as follows. My ruboy. What is the meaning of ruboy? When Yehuda said in the name of Allah, what is the meaning of the greater part of the junction of sinews, whose severance renders the animal treifa? Roiv kol echad ve'echad. It means the greater part of each and every one of the sinews. When less than this has been cut, the animal remains fit. Rav Yehuda continues, Ki amarti kami d'Shmuel omar li. When I repeated this ruling before my teacher Shmuel, he told me, Mikdit lo so'avu. Now let us see. There are 3 sinews in the junction. Accordingly, even if 2/3, majority of each one has been severed, why? There is still 1/3 of each and every one that is intact, and this suffices to spare the animal from being considered treifa. Gemara comments about Rabbi Yehuda's quotation of Shmuel. Misal Rabbanai, Omar Rabbanai, Omar Shmuel is a support. This supports Rabbanai. Rabbanai said in the name of Shmuel, Tzemes Hagidin Shamru, concerning the junction of sinews, Afilu lo nishtar lakichut asarbol, even if there remains of it only as much as the thickness of the string of a cloak, Shera, the animal is fit.
So you wouldn't need Maruba, you would need the majority.
Correct. Nishbaro etzem, if the bone was fractured and the broken ends. Remember, it learned in the Mishnah that if the bone was fractured and the broken ends pierced the skin, but it was not severed, it was not cut off completely, the following rules apply. If the greater part of the flesh remains, the animal shchita purifies the limb for consumption. But if the greater part of the flesh does not remain, the animal shchita does not purify the limb. That specific limb is not going to be kosher. The Mishnah's ruling is clarified. If the fracture occurs above the joint on the shank bone, where an amputation would render the animal treifa im rovaboso kayom zeveze muto v'im lav zeveze osu. If the greater part of the flesh remains, both this one and that one, meaning the animal as a whole and the broken limb itself, are permitted. V'im lav, but if the greater part of the flesh does not remain, both zeveze osu, this one and that one, are forbidden. Lamato min al kubo, if the fracture occurs below the joint on the cannon bone, where an amputation would not render the animal treifa, im rovaboso kayom, if the greater part of the flesh remains, zeveze muto, both this one and that one are permitted. Im lav, but if the greater part of the flesh does not remain, eiver osu ve'ema muteret, the limb is forbidden, but the animal is permitted. A dissenting interpretation of the Mishnah. Shmuel Omar, and Shmuel said, Bein lemalo, bein lamato, whether the fracture occurs above the joint, on the shank bone, or below it, on the cannon bone, the law is the same. Im roiv haboso kayom, if the greater part of the flesh remains, ze v'ze mutar, both this one and that one are permitted. Im lav, and if the greater part of the flesh does not remain, eiver also ve'ema muteres, the limb is forbidden, but the animal is permitted. Shmuel's opinion is questioned. Maskif lo Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman objected to this. The Shmuel yimru eiver mimenu mutar b'ashpo muteres. According to Shmuel, people will say of this animal, one of its limbs is thrown in the trash heap, and it is permitted. Amar le rejoinder. Amar le Rav Acha bar Rav Huna le Rav Nachman le Rav Nami. Rav Acha bar Rav Huna said to Rav Nachman, according to Rav too, the same argument pertains in a case where the leg is broken below the joint. People will say of this animal, one of its limbs is thrown in the trash heap, and it is permitted. Rav Nachman explained why he objected only to Shmuel's interpretation.
Or the animal is permitted?
The limb. Meaning they're saying it in a question mark. Is it possible that one limb is thrown into the garbage and it still be kosher? So
according to this, I'm sorry, he says in the animal itself is mutar.
Right.
Not the limb. He's talking about you'd see the limb in the ashpot, and the animal you'd say the rest of the animal is still kosher.
Right.
but the word aver means a limb, right? Aver min achai, right? A limb.
They threw the limb out, but they kept the
Right.
animal.
Right, so Rav Nachman said, Yemu Ever Mimena. According to Shmuel, people will say one of its limbs is thrown in the trash heap and it's permitted. So Rav Hacha rejoined her. He said the same. He says, Yemu Ever Mimena. People will say one of its limbs is thrown in the trash and is it permitted? So Rav Nachman explained why he objected only to Shmuel's interpretation. Omarle, he said to Rav Acha bar Ravuna, this is what I meant to say. Ever shechoyo mimeno mutol ba'ashpo muteres. According to Shmuel, people will say of this animal, one of the limbs on which its life depends, depends on, is thrown in the trash heap, and it is permitted. How can this be allowed? The Gemara does not offer any response on behalf of Shmuel. Rather, it cites a halachic ruling. Sholchu mitom, they sent a message from there, from Eretz Yisrael, that halacha kavosei de Rav. The halacha is in accordance with Rav. What did Rav say? That if an animal suffers a compound fracture of the leg above the tarsus, and the greater part of the bone is not covered with flesh, it is treifa. And halacha follows Rav. Odu sholchu kavosei de Shmuel. Later, they sent a message that the halacha is in accordance with Shmuel. Odo sholchu kavosei de Rav. Later, still sent a message saying that the halacha is actually in accordance with Rav. And they added that the limb itself is not only prohibited for consumption, but also transmit tumah through caring, i.e., it has the same degree of tumah as nevela. So the Gemara refutes the last part of this ruling. Masiv Rav Chisda challenged the ruling sent from Eretz Yisrael on the basis of a Braisa. The Braisa elaborates a Tanoic dispute cited in the Mishnah on 72a and b as to whether a limb of a fetus that was protruding from the womb at the time of the mother's shechita is spared by the shechita from acquiring the tumah of nevela. The sages argued in the Mishnah that since a treifa that is slaughtered is free of the tumah of nevela, even though it may not be eaten, it follows that the protruding limb of a fetus whose mother was slaughtered is also free of this tumah of nevela, even though it may not be eaten. Rabbi Meir responds to this in the Braisa. Loi, no, this does not follow logically. For im tiaro shchitas treifa oiso, if the shchita of treifa purifies the animal itself, and also purifies a limb that was mainly detached and is dangling from the animal itself, it is affecting purification for something that is its own body. The tyrus ubo should it therefore also purify the protruding limb of its fetus. Which is something that is not a part of its own body. Rabbi Meir stated explicitly that shchita spares a partially detached limb from acquiring the tumah of nevela. It does not, thus it does not transmit tumah through carrying. This is a refutation of the ruling sent from Eretz Yisrael. So even when the Gemara tells you ilches or kavosei, the halacha follows in accordance, it's still open for discussion. Rav Chisda's refutation stands. He is now questioned as to why he resorted to this Braisa as his proof that a partially detached limb does not have the tumah of nevel. Omar le Rabba said to Rav Chisda, Hadure apirche lamalach. Why must you go after Braisas which are not known by all in search of refutation? Challenge the ruling from the Mishnah, which every Talmudic student knows. For we learned in a Mishnah, which deals with an animal that had both a limb and a piece of flesh dangling from it. If the animal was slaughtered, they, the dangling limb and flesh, are deemed to have been prepared for tumah through contact with the animal's own blood. Div Rabbi Meir, these are the words of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Shimon says, Lo urshu, they have not been prepared for tumah. We see from the Mishnah that according to both Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Shimon, a limb dangling from an animal that is slaughtered does not have the tumah of nevela, since this emerges clearly from the Mishnah. Why must you retort to the Braisa as your refutation of the ruling sent from Eretz Yisrael? Rav Chisda responds, Omar le masnisin ika ledichuye kededochinon. The proof from the Mishnah can be deflected as we deflected it above on 73b. My proof from the explicit Braisa, however, cannot be deflected at any rate. the Brisa disproves the ruling sent from Eretz Yisrael that a partially detached limb transmits Tumah through carrying. A related incident is cited, Kisolik Rabbi Zeira, when Rabbi Zeira ascended from Babylonia to Eretz Yisrael, Ashkech Rav Yirmiyah and Yosef Kamal Shmaito. He encountered Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba sitting and stating that previous teaching of Rav, that according to our Mishnah, if the animal's bone is broken above the joint and is not mostly covered with flesh, the entire animal is unfit to be eaten. Omar le Rabbi Zeira said to him, Yishar v'chein tirgemo Aryech v'Bavel. Well said, and Aryech in Babylonia interpreted it likewise. The Gemara wonders, Aryech Manu, who is the sage that is referred to as Aryech? The Gemara said it's Shmuel. It is Shmuel. But Shmuel disputes Rav's interpretation of the Mishnah. Shmuel ultimately retracted his interpretation in favor of that of Rav. Indeed, the final ruling sent from Eretz Yisrael was that halacha accords with Rav. Tanu Rabbanon nishbaro etzem v'yotza l'chutz. If the bone was fractured and broke through the skin, im oiru v'asur chayfen asur b'muto, im lav asur. If the skin and flesh cover its greater portion, it is permitted for consumption. But if not, if the skin and flesh do not cover its greater portion, also it is prohibited for consumption. The Gemara says, "V'chama ruboy," and how much is its greater portion? Ki also Rav Dimi, Omar Rabbi Yochanan, when Rav Dimi came to Bavel from Eretz Yisrael, he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Roiv Ovyo. It means the greater portion of the bone's thickness must be covered.
She's trying to.
But some say it as follows. Rov Ch4, it means that the greater portion of the flesh around the bone's circumference must be intact. A ruling is issued reflecting the variant versions of the explanation. Amar of Papa said, Hilkach be'inan roiv ovyo, we require that the greater portion of the bone's thickness be covered with flesh, uva'inan roiv ekefoi. And we also require that the greater portion of the flesh around its circumference be intact. The Gemara discusses the Mishnah's law. Omar Ula, Omar Rabbi Yochanan. Ula said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Oir harei hu kevasar. Skin is equivalent of flesh. If the flesh at the point of the fracture was torn away from beneath the skin, but the skin remains intact and covers the greater portion of the thickness and circumference of the broken bone, it is as though it were covered with flesh and it remains fit. Amar le Rav Nachman le Ula. So Ula's ruling is questioned. Rav Nachman said to Ula, V'lei mamar oir mitztoraf levasar. Let Master say skin may be combined with flesh to cover the greater portion of the broken bone. The ho oir uvasar kitani. For the Brisa states that if the skin and flesh cover its greater portion, it is permitted. Why do you say that even skin alone suffices? Ula replies, Omar le, he said to Rav Nachman, Ula said to Rav Nachman, Anan oir vasar teninan. I was taught the Brisa as stating that if skin or flesh cover the greater portion of the bone, it is permitted. A variant version of the preceding discussion. Ika de Omrei, there are those who say it as follows. Omar Ula, Omar Rabbi Yochanan. Ula said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Oir mitztoraf levasar. Skin may be combined with flesh to cover the greater portion of the broken bone. That is, half the cover may be composed of mere skin, as long as the other half is composed of flesh. Ula's ruling is questioned. Omar le Rav Nachman le'ula v'lei mamar oir mashlim levoso. Nachman said to Ula, let master say, skin may complete a cover that is composed mainly of flesh. Lechumra, which would be a more stringent ruling. Ula replies, Omar le, he said to Rav Nachman, Ana uvda yodano. I know of an incident through which the correctness of my ruling comes to light. De'ahu bar goizlo de'habe Rav Yitzchak. For there was a certain young pigeon with broken leg that was brought in the academy of Rav Yitzchak for a ruling. The oil mitztorf levoso havo, which had a covering over the broken bone that was composed of the skin combined with flesh, half skin and half flesh. Also lekame de Rabbi Yochanan. Rav Yitzchak came before Rabbi Yochanan to inquire as to its status, the status of the pigeon. And Rabbi Yochanan ruled it fit for consumption. We see that skin may be in fact be combined with an equal measure of flesh in composing the covering of a broken bone. Rav Nachman retorts, Omerle, he said to Ula, Bar Goizlo Ko'omat, do you mean to cite the case of a young pigeon as proof? Bar Goizlo Derakich Shani, a young pigeon whose skin is soft, is different than an animal. For the pigeon's skin is itself treated like flesh in regard to this law. An animal, the tough hide, however, the tough skin, cannot be treated like flesh, and therefore the law may be that the skin may only complete a cover that is composed mainly of flesh. The Gemara discusses further what qualifies as flesh, as boso. Hanu gidin rakin de osu lekame de ravo. There was a young animal with a broken leg whose greater portion was covered by a combination of flesh and certain soft sinews that was brought before Rava for a ruling. Omar Rava said, Lamai leichush lehu. What should we be concerned about regarding these sinews? We may surely treat them like flesh for the following reasons. First, Rabbi Yochanan has said, Gidin shesoifon le'akshes, concerning soft sinews that will ultimately harden. Nimnin alei bePesach. We may register on their basis for portions in the Pesach offering. We see that Rabbi Yochanan considers soft sinews like flesh. Ve'oid. Furthermore, the Torah was concerned for Israel's money. It behooves us, therefore, to rely upon Rabbi Yochanan's opinion and rule leniently that the broken leg, which is covered by a combination of flesh and soft sinews, is fit for consumption.
Wow.
Welcome to you.